In a world where institutional hypocrisy runs rampant, the brutal truth is finally coming to light. The very bank that promised fairness has been complicit in systemic discrimination. The indignity of being judged solely by your appearance, stripped of dignity and respect, is an outrage that cannot and will not be tolerated. This is not just a story of financial mismanagement. It's a searing indictment of a corrupt system that preys on the vulnerable and betrays its own values. Prepare to confront a harsh reality that ignites fury and demands change. Imani Carter was born in a modest town on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, a place where the blazing desert sun met endless skies and where dreams were as vast as the horizon. Growing up in a humble neighborhood, Imani's childhood was steeped in the simple yet profound lessons imparted by her family. Her parents, both hardworking individuals who had weathered life's many storms, taught her early on that success wasn't a matter of luck but of grit, perseverance, and a relentless belief in one's own potential. From as early as she could remember, Imani was captivated by the concept of money, not in its glitter or superficial allure, but in its power to change lives and create opportunities. While other children spent their weekends chasing dreams on playgrounds or riding bikes around dusty streets, Imani could often be found sitting at a small, worn-out desk in her modest home, meticulously counting coins in a glass jar. Each coin, no matter how insignificant it might seem, was a symbol of a future full of possibilities. She would organize them into little piles, each designated for a specific purpose. One for her future college tuition, another for her family's emergencies, and yet another for gifts and charitable acts. These early acts of discipline and foresight sowed the seeds of what would later blossom into a passion for financial empowerment. Her neighborhood, though not affluent, was a tight-knit community where neighbors looked out for one another. In such an environment, Imani learned the value of community support and the importance of lending a helping hand. These values resonated deeply with her, shaping her worldview and inspiring her to one day create a space where everyone, regardless of their background, could have access to the financial opportunities they deserved. Imani's academic journey was nothing short of extraordinary. Excelling in mathematics and economics from a young age, she quickly became known for her uncanny ability to break down complex problems with ease. Teachers recognized in her not just a brilliant mind, but a soul that was determined to make a difference. Even when resources were scarce, Imani's thirst for knowledge was insatiable. She spent countless evenings poring over textbooks by the faint light of a single lamp, her eyes alight with the promise of a better future. As high school progressed, Imani's dedication and hard work did not go unnoticed. Her impressive grades and leadership qualities earned her several academic awards and the admiration of her peers and mentors alike. It wasn't long before a prestigious university extended an acceptance letter that would change the course of her life. Imani Carter was awarded a full scholarship to one of the nation's top institutions, a moment that symbolized not just her academic prowess, but also the recognition that potential can thrive even in the most challenging circumstances. At university, Imani entered a world brimming with possibilities but also with its own subtle barriers. Among her peers, she often found herself one of the few students of color in her finance and economics classes. While the experience was at times isolating, it only served to strengthen her resolve. She was determined to not only excel academically but also to use her position to uplift others who might otherwise be left behind. Joining various investment clubs and entrepreneurial ventures, Imani began to form a network of like-minded individuals, students and professionals who shared her vision of a more inclusive financial world. It was during these formative years that Imani's dream started to take shape. While many were content with climbing the corporate ladder in established financial institutions, she envisioned something radically different. A financial institution that would serve as a beacon of hope for those often overlooked by traditional banks. Her goal was clear: to build an organization that wasn't just about profit margins, but about empowering communities, providing fair opportunities, and promoting financial literacy among all. Every lecture, every late-night study session, and every discussion with mentors helped crystallize her vision. Imani began to imagine a bank that would operate with a core philosophy of respect, inclusivity, and genuine care for its customers. She saw a future where financial services were not the exclusive domain of the affluent but were accessible to anyone who dared to dream. It wasn't merely about accumulating wealth. It was about redistributing it in a manner that uplifted entire communities. Graduation day arrived like a beacon of hope. The applause that echoed in the grand hall was not just for academic success. It was a celebration of Imani's journey, a journey that had begun with a small jar of coins and the simple belief that she could change the world. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she carried with her the aspirations of her community, the unwavering support of her family, and the countless nights of hard work that had defined her life. After graduation, instead of taking the easy route of joining a high-profile Wall Street firm, Imani chose a path that resonated more deeply with her core values. She took on roles in mid-tier financial institutions, absorbing every lesson, every success, and every setback. Each experience was a stepping stone, a vital piece of the intricate puzzle that would eventually form the foundation of her dream. With every challenge, she grew more resolute, more committed to the idea that financial services should be a tool for social change. During those early years in the industry, Imani Carter was not only honing her skills but also building relationships with mentors, peers, and community leaders. These relationships proved invaluable. They provided her with insights into the inner workings of the financial world, as well as the moral fortitude required to lead with compassion and integrity. It was during this period that the seed for what would later become Pioneer Bank was planted in her heart. She envisioned an institution that would serve those often left behind by the traditional banking system, a bank that would operate on principles of fairness, empathy, and unwavering commitment to its customers. Emotions ran high as Imani reflected on her journey. There were moments of pure joy when she aced a particularly challenging exam, and moments of quiet despair when obstacles seemed insurmountable. Yet, each of these moments contributed to the rich tapestry of her experience, shaping her into a leader who understood both the struggles and the triumphs of life. Her heart was both tender and resilient, capable of feeling deep sorrow at the injustices of the world, while also buoyed by an unyielding optimism for the future. Her vision for Pioneer Bank was more than just a business plan. It was a mission born out of personal experience. Imani wanted to create a safe haven for those who had been marginalized, a place where every customer felt seen, heard, and valued. This bank would not only provide essential financial services but would also offer education, support, and guidance to help people build a better life for themselves. It was a radical idea, one that challenged the status quo and promised a future where financial institutions worked for the people, not the other way around. Imani's early life, marked by the warmth of community and the hardships of economic limitations, had given her a unique perspective on the power of resilience. She carried with her the memories of long nights spent studying under dim lights and the echoes of her parents' steadfast encouragement. Every setback was met with a renewed determination, a quiet, burning desire to rise above adversity and create something meaningful. As she prepared to embark on the next phase of her journey, Imani Carter knew that her path would be fraught with challenges. The financial world was notoriously resistant to change, and she was about to confront not just bureaucratic hurdles, but also deep-seated prejudices and outdated practices. Yet, within her burned the conviction that real change was possible. She believed that by staying true to her values and remaining committed to the principles of fairness and inclusivity, she could transform the financial landscape and offer hope to countless individuals who had been sidelined by conventional systems. In those early moments, as Imani dreamed of a future where every person could thrive financially, she couldn't help but wonder, what if the very system meant to protect people was instead keeping them from realizing their full potential? What if the power of money could be harnessed not to create more inequality, but to bridge the gap between those who have and those who do not? These questions haunted her, fueling an inner dialogue that was both painful and exhilarating. It was a dialogue that would eventually give rise to Pioneer Bank, a financial institution built on the promise of equity and opportunity. Imani Carter's story is a testament to the transformative power of hope, determination, and the unyielding belief that one person can spark change. Her journey, from counting coins in a modest jar to envisioning a bank that champions social justice, is filled with moments of profound introspection, joyous triumphs, and the occasional sting of heartbreak. It is a narrative that speaks not only to the possibilities of personal achievement but also to the enduring strength of community and the human spirit. What is one belief or value that has driven you to overcome challenges? Imani Carter's vision for Pioneer Bank was built on the promise of fairness, inclusivity, and community empowerment. Yet, even the most thoughtfully designed systems can harbor flaws. With this conviction burning in her heart, Imani decided it was time to see firsthand how her bank truly served its customers. In an effort to validate the integrity of Pioneer Bank's day-to-day operations, she resolved to visit one of its downtown branches, not as the formidable CEO, but as an ordinary customer. On a crisp autumn morning in Phoenix, Imani donned a simple, understated outfit. A clean, white blouse paired with navy slacks and modest gold jewelry. She was determined to blend into the crowd, to experience the branch's service as anyone else might. The branch, located on a busy street lined with coffee shops and small boutiques, exuded modernity with its polished glass doors and minimalist decor, a physical representation of the bank's mission to merge contemporary design with community warmth. Stepping through the doors, Imani was greeted by the soft murmur of conversation and the steady rhythm of keyboards tapping at counters. She noted the cheerful, yet focused demeanors of the staff, who worked diligently to assist a diverse clientele. For a fleeting moment, a sense of pride welled up within her. Here was a space she had helped create, a space intended to embody respect and empowerment. After a few moments of quietly observing the ebb and flow of daily business, Imani moved toward the teller counter. As she waited in line, she noticed the subtle details. The friendly smiles exchanged among staff, the way customers were acknowledged by name, and the soft hum of a well-rehearsed routine that reassured everyone present. It was a picture of efficiency and warmth on the surface, at least. However, as Imani's turn approached, a tinge of unease began to stir within her. There was an undercurrent in the air, a slight hesitance in the way a newly assigned branch manager, Elliot Turner, interacted with a few customers. Elliot, a man in his early 40s with neatly combed silver-streaked hair and an impeccably tailored suit, had been recruited from another region with a reputation for rigorous adherence to protocol. While his polished exterior exuded confidence, his demeanor seemed, at times, overly guarded, a potential harbinger of the rigidity that Imani had long sought to eradicate. When Imani finally reached the teller, her experience took an unexpected turn. The teller, a young woman named Sierra, greeted her with a practiced smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" Sierra asked, her tone courteous but measured. Imani replied, "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please." It was a simple request, one that should have flowed through the bank's well-oiled system without a hitch. Yet, before Sierra could proceed, Elliot appeared at the counter. His arrival was abrupt, a sharp contrast to the otherwise gentle rhythm of the branch. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but may I see some identification?" he said in a clipped tone that immediately made Imani's skin prickle. Although standard procedures required a valid ID for transactions, the way Elliot demanded it carried an undercurrent of scrutiny that felt distinctly personal. Imani handed over her driver's license with a steady hand. As Elliot inspected the ID, a flicker of doubt passed across his face. There was a split second, barely noticeable, where his eyes hesitated, as if he were questioning whether the customer before him truly belonged. Imani felt that silent judgment as if it were a tangible force, weighing on her shoulders. "Ma'am," Elliot said after a prolonged silence, "this line is for customers with established accounts. Are you sure you have an account here?" His tone, laced with an almost imperceptible skepticism, was jarring. Imani, maintaining her calm, responded, "I have been a Pioneer Bank customer for many years." Despite her composed demeanor, inside, a storm of emotions began to churn. Disappointment, indignation, and a poignant sadness that the institution she had built could still harbor such reservations. The waiting area fell into a brief, uncomfortable hush as onlookers exchanged glances. Sierra's eyes darted between Imani and Elliot, silently pleading for a resolution that upheld the bank's promise of respect. Imani, realizing the delicate balance between professionalism and justice, requested to step aside for a private discussion. "Could we take this conversation to your office?" she asked quietly, her voice steady but carrying an unmistakable edge of resolve. Reluctantly, Elliot agreed, and the two moved into a small office with frosted glass walls. The room, meticulously arranged with a few awards and a sleek desk, seemed more a shrine to corporate achievement than a space for honest dialogue. As they sat, Imani's emotions bubbled beneath the surface. She was determined to understand the root of this unnecessary interrogation and to ensure that the bank's policies were applied with fairness and without prejudice. "Mr. Turner," Imani began, her voice calm yet firm, "I'm here to understand what is happening. I know the procedures well, and my account is in perfect standing. Can you explain why you are questioning my legitimacy today?" Elliot's eyes darted nervously, and for a moment, the rigid mask of professionalism faltered. "It's just that large withdrawals require additional verification," he stammered, his words inadequate to justify the tone and suspicion that had preceded his request. Imani's heart sank as she listened. The explanation, though seemingly procedural, smacked of a personal bias, a bias that contradicted everything Pioneer Bank stood for. "I understand the need for security," she said slowly, "but this isn't about security. It's about ensuring that every customer is treated with dignity, regardless of how they appear. My account details show that I am a long-standing customer, and there's no reason to doubt my identity." The conversation in the cramped office was thick with unspoken tension. Imani's mind raced through memories of her own struggles against bias, recalling moments when she had been dismissed or doubted simply because she didn't fit someone's preconceived notion of success. The irony was bitter. Here she was, in the very institution she had nurtured, facing a challenge to her legitimacy from someone who should have been an ally in promoting the bank's inclusive values. Elliot's discomfort was palpable. His gaze dropped, and for a moment, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry if this has come off the wrong way, ma'am. I'm just following the protocol as I understand it." Imani's eyes softened slightly, but her resolve did not waver. "Protocols must serve us, not the other way around," she said. "When they are used as a shield for prejudice, they fail their purpose. I didn't come here to be interrogated. I came here to be served, as every customer deserves." The confrontation was brief but searing. Outside the office, the tension among the waiting customers had grown. Some watched with apprehension, while others whispered among themselves, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Sierra's anxious eyes met Imani's as she re-entered the lobby, a silent expression of hope mingled with regret. After a few long minutes, Elliot emerged, visibly flustered. "I apologize for the inconvenience," he said, his voice lacking conviction. The withdrawal was processed with minimal fanfare, but the atmosphere in the branch had shifted irrevocably. It was as though an invisible line had been drawn, one that demarcated not just a service interaction, but the deeper values at stake. For Imani, the experience was both a personal disappointment and a professional wake-up call. It underscored the reality that despite all the progress, biases could still seep into even the most well-intentioned systems. As she left the branch, her thoughts swirled with determination. This was a moment that could not be swept under the rug. It demanded attention and corrective action. In the days that followed, Imani Carter did not allow the incident to fade into obscurity. Instead, she initiated a series of internal reviews and discussions with her executive team. Her goal was to ensure that every branch of Pioneer Bank truly embodied the principles of respect and equality that had given birth to the institution. Training modules were revisited, and new protocols were designed to empower employees to act with empathy rather than suspicion. Imani knew that the bank's strength lay not in its policies alone but in the spirit with which those policies were enacted. Emotionally, Imani found herself oscillating between a profound sense of responsibility and a personal sorrow for the customers who might have felt marginalized. The experience had also ignited a renewed passion in her, a fire that pushed her to advocate even more fiercely for the underrepresented. It was a bittersweet reminder that the path to true inclusivity was often paved with challenges, but each challenge presented an opportunity to build something better. That day, as she reflected on the encounter while driving home through the vibrant streets of Phoenix, Amani's mind was abuzz with ideas. How could she further refine the training for managers like Elliot? What additional measures could Pioneer Bank adopt to ensure that every customer, irrespective of their background or appearance, received impeccable service? And most importantly, how could she turn this painful experience into a catalyst for lasting change? The answers were not immediate, but Amani was determined to find them. She believed that every interaction, especially the difficult ones, had the power to inspire growth and transformation. The incident at the downtown branch was not just a misstep. It was a mirror reflecting a part of the system that needed evolution. In the quiet moments that followed, she resolved to remain vigilant, to listen deeply to the voices of her customers and employees, and to ensure that Pioneer Bank remained a sanctuary of trust and opportunity. As she prepared for another day at work, Amani's heart was heavy yet hopeful. The challenges she witnessed did not diminish her belief in the potential for change. Rather, they reinforced her commitment to lead with both strength and compassion. The journey ahead would require patience, persistence, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But she was ready to transform every setback into a stepping stone toward a more just and equitable future. What would you do if you encountered bias in a place you trusted? In the wake of the uneasy encounter at the teller counter, the atmosphere at the downtown Pioneer Bank branch grew palpably tense. Within the modest confines of a glass-partitioned office, Amani Carter, still in her unassuming attire, faced Elliot Turner, the branch manager whose earlier behavior had already stirred a quiet uproar among the onlookers in the lobby. The door closed behind them, sealing the space in an almost oppressive silence that presaged a confrontation destined to test the very core of Pioneer Bank's values. Amani's pulse thumped steadily, each beat echoing the multitude of experiences and lessons from her past. The familiar sting of injustice that she had fought her entire life bubbled up at this moment, an injustice occurring within the walls of the institution she had painstakingly built. Steeling herself, she began the conversation with a measured yet unyielding tone. "Mr. Turner, I must insist on clarity. My account, my history, everything is in order. I have been a loyal customer of Pioneer Bank for years. Yet you treated me as though I were a stranger. I need to know why you felt the need to question my legitimacy." Elliot's eyes darted from side to side as if searching for an escape. His initial defensiveness gave way to a strained attempt at justification. "Miss Carter, I was simply following protocol. Large withdrawals, especially ones that seem unexpected, require additional scrutiny. It's nothing personal," he stuttered, his voice lacking conviction. However, his words did little to mask the underlying tone of uncertainty and bias that had marked his earlier approach. Amani leaned forward, her gaze intense and unwavering. "Protocol must serve fairness, Mr. Turner, not suspicion or prejudice. I understand the need for due diligence. However, when such measures are applied selectively, they not only betray our values, but also undermine the trust our customers place in us." Her words, gentle yet piercing, filled the room with the weight of accountability. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Elliot fidgeted with a pen on the desk, the simple act underscoring his discomfort. His fingers trembled slightly, betraying a growing awareness that his actions were no longer defensible. I didn't mean to cause any discomfort, Miss Carter," he managed to say, his tone now bordering on contrition. "I was merely doing my job." "But whose job is it to judge?" Amani countered softly, her voice imbued with the power of her convictions. "If you had followed the procedures as they were intended, without the taint of personal bias, this conversation would never have been necessary. Today, I was not just another customer. I was a representation of every individual who has ever been marginalized or doubted because of their appearance or background. And that is why I am here." Elliot's eyes fell to the desk, and for a long moment he said nothing. The quiet was punctuated only by the distant hum of the air conditioning and the soft shuffle of papers, a stark contrast to the emotional tempest swirling within the room. Amani could almost feel the collective pulse of the community outside, the weight of unspoken stories and shared struggles lending strength to her resolve. With a deep, Steadying breath, Imani continued, "Protocols exist to protect, not to alienate. The very mission of Pioneer Bank is to create an environment of inclusion, respect, and empowerment. Today, the way you questioned my identity was not only a failure to uphold that mission, it was a reminder of the deep-rooted prejudices that still linger in our society." Her words, though measured, carried the full force of her passion. A passion that had fueled her rise from modest beginnings to the helm of a transformative financial institution. As she spoke, every word resonated with the history of countless moments when she had been underestimated, when her capabilities were questioned based solely on stereotypes. Now, standing before Elliot Turner, she was not only defending herself but also those who had long been denied the dignity they deserved. Elliot finally lifted his eyes, and in them, Imani saw a reflection of fear, a recognition of the gravity of the moment. "Miss Carter," he began haltingly, I apologize if my actions appeared biased. I assure you, my intention was to safeguard our institution." His voice wavered, betraying the inadequacy of his defense. "I understand now that my approach was flawed." But Imani was far from finished. An apology, while a necessary first step, does not erase the harm done. I need you to understand that every time a customer is subjected to undue suspicion, it chips away at the very foundation of trust we have worked so hard to build. Our procedures should be our shield against fraud, not a weapon to enforce unwarranted discrimination. Her gaze hardened as she continued, "Today, I experienced firsthand how easily bias can creep into the system. It is not enough to claim adherence to policy if that policy becomes a cover for personal prejudices. I expect you, as the branch manager, to reflect on this incident and to commit to a change. A commitment to treating every customer with the respect and dignity that Pioneer Bank promises." For a long moment, the only sound was the soft rustling of papers and the distant murmurs from the corridor. Elliot seemed to shrink beneath the weight of her words. His earlier bravado diminished to a meek resignation. The room had transformed into a crucible of accountability, where every word spoken bore the potential to reshape the culture of the institution. Imani's tone softened slightly as she offered a final piece of guidance. "I am instituting an immediate review of our procedures at this branch. I will ensure that training is reinforced so that no one, no matter who they are, is ever made to feel like they do not belong in this bank. Consider this not just a reprimand, but a call to action to align your practices with the values we hold dear." Elliot bowed his head. "I understand, Miss Carter. I will do everything in my power to amend my approach and ensure that our protocols are applied equitably. I'm truly sorry for the distress I've caused." Though the words were met with a semblance of acceptance, Imani knew that genuine change required more than promises. It required transformation at every level of the organization. The encounter was a stark reminder that even within the framework of a well-intentioned institution, human flaws could undermine its mission. And as the conversation drew to a close, the echoes of that realization would not soon fade. With the meeting concluded, Imani returned to the lobby. The branch, once buzzing with routine, now felt subdued, its occupants silently processing the weight of what had just transpired. The incident had become a microcosm of the broader challenges facing not only Pioneer Bank but the entire financial industry. The urgent need to confront and eradicate systemic biases wherever they might be found. As Imani stepped back into the light of the bustling street, she carried with her a renewed sense of purpose. This confrontation was more than an isolated event. It was a catalyst for deeper introspection, for reform, and for a reawakening of the values that had inspired her journey. She knew that change would not come overnight, but each moment of reckoning was a step toward a more just and inclusive future. Her heart still pounded with a mixture of resolve and empathy, a complex blend of emotions that reminded her why she had chosen this path. Every hardship, every moment of doubt, had led her here, and she was prepared to fight for a system that reflected the best of what humanity could be. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to challenge a practice or belief that didn't align with your values? In the wake of the intense confrontation in the branch manager's office, a profound silence seemed to settle over Pioneer Bank's downtown branch. The heated discussion between Imani Carter and Elliot Turner had left not only a mark on the individuals present but also a ripple effect that would soon extend far beyond that single branch. The following morning, as the first light of dawn broke over Phoenix, Amani gathered her trusted team of senior executives and human resources professionals for a meeting that would determine the bank's next steps. The boardroom was filled with a mix of determination and solemnity. Amani, seated at the head of the long, polished table, reviewed a series of incident reports, employee testimonials, and internal audits. The evidence was clear. Elliot Turner's actions were not isolated. They formed part of a pattern of behavior that had, over time, sown seeds of doubt and unease among staff and customers alike. Testimonies from several employees emerged, stories of unwarranted scrutiny directed at customers, subtle yet damaging remarks, and a general air of superiority that had created an unwelcoming environment. Amani's eyes, usually so calm and reassuring, burned with an intensity born of both disappointment and resolve. "We built Pioneer Bank on the principle that every customer deserves respect and fairness," she said, her voice resonating with authority. "Today's events remind us that policies are only as good as the hearts and minds of those who enforce them. We cannot allow prejudice, whether overt or subtle, to undermine the trust our community places in us." Her words galvanized the room. Karen Brooks, the head of human resources, spoke up. "We've already received several internal reports about similar issues in other branches. While they might not have escalated to a confrontation like this, they indicate a systemic problem that we need to address immediately." Karen's tone was firm yet empathetic, acknowledging both the pain experienced by customers and the potential for growth and healing within the institution. Amani then outlined the immediate actions to be taken. First, Elliot Turner would be placed on immediate unpaid leave, pending a comprehensive investigation into his conduct. An independent review committee, comprising senior executives, HR specialists, and external experts in diversity and inclusion, was to be assembled to scrutinize not only Elliot's actions but also the broader policies that had allowed such behavior to go unchecked. "This isn't about punishment for its own sake," Amani explained, "but about learning from our mistakes and reinforcing our commitment to equity." Over the next few weeks, a series of disciplinary meetings were held. Employees were invited to share their experiences, and detailed surveys were conducted to gauge the overall work environment at Pioneer Bank. Many staff members, some of whom had previously felt voiceless, found themselves empowered to speak honestly about times when they or their colleagues had been subjected to discriminatory practices. These candid discussions painted a picture of an institution that, despite its noble mission, had faltered in the face of ingrained biases. As the investigation unfolded, Imani spent long hours reviewing the findings. One of the most revealing aspects was how certain standard operating procedures were being interpreted in ways that inadvertently encouraged discrimination. For example, the policy requiring additional verification for large transactions, meant to safeguard against fraud, had been applied unevenly, targeting customers who did not fit a narrow stereotype of what a trusted customer should look like. The evidence was overwhelming. It was not just a matter of one manager's misconduct, but a systemic issue that needed a complete overhaul. Imani convened another meeting, this time with branch managers from across the region. In a spacious, sunlit conference room at the bank's headquarters, she addressed the assembled group with unwavering conviction. "Our customers are at the heart of everything we do," she said. "It is our duty to ensure that our policies protect them without compromising their dignity. We must recalibrate our approach to customer service. I expect each of you to reflect on your practices and commit to ongoing training in cultural sensitivity and unbiased service." Her directives were met with a mix of nods and murmurs of agreement. Some branch managers, who had themselves witnessed the pitfalls of unchecked bias, expressed relief that the issue was being addressed at the highest level. Others, more hesitant, wondered how changes would affect their daily operations. Imani reassured them, "Change is never easy, but it is necessary. Our goal is to create an environment where every individual, whether a customer or an employee, feels valued and respected." In the days following the meeting, the Independent Review Committee presented its preliminary findings. Their report detailed not only Elliot Turner's specific infractions, but also recommended a series of reforms to ensure uniformity in service standards. Among these recommendations were the implementation of mandatory sensitivity training for all staff, revisiting and clarifying customer verification procedures, and instituting a transparent feedback system where customers could report any instance of discriminatory behavior without fear of retribution. At the branch where the confrontation had occurred, a subtle transformation began to take shape. A new interim branch manager, Denise Harper, was appointed, a leader known for her empathetic approach and firm commitment to Pioneer Bank's values. Denise's arrival was met with cautious optimism by the staff. In her first team meeting, she shared her vision for the branch. "We're here to build trust," she told her team. "Trust that is earned through our actions, our words, and our willingness to listen. Let's work together to rebuild the confidence that may have been shaken today." Employees like Sierra, the teller who had been caught in the middle of the earlier incident, found new courage under Denise's leadership. In private conversations, many expressed gratitude for the opportunity to share their stories and the hope that their voices would lead to tangible change. Sierra recalled, "For the first time, I felt like someone was really listening. I'm proud to be part of a team that's willing to admit mistakes and work to correct them." Meanwhile, the broader community began to take notice of Pioneer Bank's efforts to address its internal issues. Social media buzzed with news of the investigation, and local media outlets picked up the story. Headlines ranged from praise for Imani Carter's decisive actions to in-depth discussions about the challenges of combating systemic bias in corporate America. While the publicity was not entirely within Imani's control, she viewed it as an opportunity to reaffirm the bank's commitment to transformation. In interviews, she spoke candidly about the lessons learned, emphasizing that accountability and transparency were the cornerstones of any successful institution. Despite the positive momentum, the process was not without its emotional toll. Imani found herself revisiting memories of her own struggles, of moments when she had felt the sting of prejudice and the weight of underestimation. Yet, these recollections only strengthened her resolve. "Every setback is a lesson," she often reminded herself. "If I can transform my personal challenges into a force for good, imagine what we can achieve for our community." One particularly moving incident solidified the bank's resolve to change. A longtime customer, Mrs. Ramirez, a dignified woman who had been with Pioneer Bank for decades, approached Imani in the lobby one day. With tears in her eyes, Mrs. Ramirez expressed gratitude for the changes being implemented. "I have seen my share of hurtful experiences over the years, not just in banks but everywhere," she said softly. "Today I feel hopeful. I see that my voice matters, and that gives me strength." Her words resonated deeply with Imani, reaffirming that the journey toward inclusivity was not merely a corporate mandate, but a deeply personal and communal quest for dignity. As the internal reforms took root, Imani initiated a broader community outreach program. Pioneer Bank launched a series of workshops and financial literacy seminars designed specifically for underserved communities. These sessions were not just about managing money, they were about empowerment, education, and the promise that everyone deserved a fair chance. Imani personally attended several of these events, listening to the concerns and hopes of individuals whose voices had long been marginalized. In one such seminar, a young woman, barely out of high school, confided in Imani about her dream of owning a small business, only to be repeatedly shut down by traditional banks. Imani's response was both heartfelt and practical. "Here at Pioneer Bank, we're here to support you, every step of the way." That day, as the young woman walked out with a newfound sense of possibility, Imani felt that the seeds of change were firmly planted. The transformation within Pioneer Bank was not instantaneous, nor was it without setbacks. There were moments of resistance, internal debates, and the inevitable challenges of altering long-established practices. Yet, each hurdle reinforced Imani's belief that a true culture shift required both policy and empathy. She began to hold monthly open forums, inviting employees and customers alike to share their experiences and suggestions. These forums evolved into vibrant exchanges of ideas, where the bank's leadership listened intently, and where feedback was not only welcomed but celebrated as a cornerstone of growth. As months passed, the once troubled branch began to reflect the core values of Pioneer Bank more clearly. Customer satisfaction scores steadily climbed, and word-of-mouth endorsements from the community brought in new clients. Denise Harper, now firmly in her role as branch manager, reported that staff morale had improved significantly. "We're not just a bank," she remarked in one meeting. "We're a community, and every community thrives on mutual respect and shared accountability." Amani Carter's personal journey and her leadership during this tumultuous period became a beacon of hope, not just for the bank, but for anyone who had ever felt marginalized by systemic injustice. The rigorous internal review and the subsequent reforms signaled a turning point, a declaration that fairness, accountability, and compassion must prevail over bias and complacency. Have you ever experienced a moment when a difficult situation led to positive change in your life or community? What steps did you take, or wish you could have taken, to overcome the challenges you faced? In the weeks following the internal reforms at Pioneer Bank, a storm was quietly brewing on the horizon, one that would force the institution to put its principles on trial in a very literal sense. Elliot Turner, the branch manager whose actions had sparked such transformative changes, refused to quietly accept his fate. Claiming wrongful termination and alleging reverse discrimination, he filed a lawsuit against Pioneer Bank. His legal challenge quickly escalated into a high-profile case, drawing media attention and thrusting the bank's core values into the public eye. For Amani Carter, the lawsuit was more than a personal attack. It was an opportunity to prove that the reforms were not only necessary but just. Determined to defend the integrity of Pioneer Bank, Amani assembled her legal team, led by Karen Brooks, who had been instrumental in shaping the bank's new policies. Together, they pored over months of internal reports, employee testimonies, and surveillance recordings from the branch. Every piece of evidence painted a consistent picture. Elliot Turner's behavior had repeatedly deviated from the bank's mission of respect, fairness, and inclusivity. On the day of the trial, the courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Local news crews and community advocates gathered outside, eager to witness the confrontation between a determined leader defending her vision and a disgruntled former manager fighting to salvage his reputation. Inside the courtroom, Imani sat composed, her expression one of quiet resolve. She was surrounded by her legal team and supported by a number of employees and community members who had bravely come forward to share their experiences. The proceedings began with Elliot Turner's attorney presenting a narrative of alleged reverse discrimination. He argued that Elliot had been unfairly dismissed, claiming that Pioneer Bank had allowed Imani's personal identity to cloud objective judgment. "My client," he declared, "was simply enforcing protocols that are standard practice across the industry. His removal was not a consequence of any bias on his part, but rather a misunderstanding of a rigid policy." His voice carried a mix of desperation and insistence as he attempted to recast the earlier confrontation as a mere procedural misstep rather than a deliberate abuse of power. Karen Brooks, serving as Pioneer Bank's lead counsel, rose to counter these arguments with meticulous evidence. "Your Honor," she began, "we have documented proof that the very protocols Mr. Turner claims to have been following were applied selectively, and with a discernible personal bias. We will show that multiple employees, as well as customers, experienced similar treatment under his management." One by one, testimonies were brought forward. A veteran teller recounted an incident in which Mr. Turner had unjustly questioned a longtime customer's credentials solely because the customer's attire did not match his preconceived notions of what a trusted customer should look like. Another staff member described how Mr. Turner had made disparaging remarks that were later corroborated by recorded conversations. As the trial unfolded, it became clear that the evidence was overwhelming. Photographs of internal memos, email exchanges between branch personnel, and video footage from the branch all underscored the fact that Mr. Turner had not only deviated from standard operating procedures, but had done so in ways that directly contradicted Pioneer Bank's core values. The turning point came when a key witness, a customer who had been visibly shaken by an earlier incident, stepped forward. In her testimony, she recounted how Mr. Turner's actions had made her feel not only unwelcome but also deeply disrespected. "I came to Pioneer Bank because I believed in being seen and treated fairly," she said. her voice quivering with both emotion and conviction. Instead, I was made to feel like I didn't belong, like I was an outsider in my own community. Imani Carter's testimony was equally powerful. Sitting confidently before the judge and jury, she recounted the events that had unfolded at the branch with clarity and unwavering determination. "I did not come to Pioneer Bank to be interrogated about my identity," she stated. "I built this bank on the belief that every person, regardless of background, deserves dignity and respect. When our protocols are used to undermine that belief, it is our duty to correct the course." Her words resonated deeply, not just as a defense of a business decision, but as a broader statement about the fight against systemic bias. Throughout the trial, Imani's calm authority stood in stark contrast to Elliot Turner's increasingly erratic demeanor. His arguments, once filled with bravado, began to crumble under the weight of the evidence. As the jury listened, it became evident that the case was less about enforcing policy and more about preserving the soul of an institution that had always prided itself on inclusivity. After several days of intense deliberation, the courtroom atmosphere shifted from tension to a cautious optimism. The judge, having reviewed the extensive documentation and heartfelt testimonies, delivered a decisive verdict in favor of Pioneer Bank. In his ruling, he stated, "This case is not merely about a single managerial decision but about the values that underpin an institution. When policies are wielded as instruments of exclusion rather than protection, they betray the very purpose for which they were created. I find that Pioneer Bank has acted in accordance with its commitment to fairness, and any deviation from standard procedure by Mr. Turner is both indefensible and contrary to the principles of this organization." The ruling sent ripples through the community. Headlines soon reflected a narrative of vindication. Pioneer Bank had stood firm against the forces of prejudice, and Imani Carter's leadership had been validated not only in the eyes of the law but in the hearts of the people she served. Social media erupted with messages of support, with hashtags like #JusticeAtPioneer and #IntegrityInBanking trending locally. The outcome was celebrated as a landmark victory for those fighting systemic bias, not just in banking, but in every institution where discrimination had been allowed to fester. Yet, even as the legal battle came to a close, Imani was acutely aware that the journey was far from over. The trial had shone a harsh light on the challenges that lay ahead in transforming entrenched behaviors and reshaping corporate culture. It was a reminder that true progress was iterative, requiring constant vigilance, empathy, and a willingness to adapt. Determined to ensure that the lessons learned from this ordeal would not be forgotten, Imani announced a series of new initiatives aimed at deepening the bank's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Among these was the establishment of a permanent oversight committee dedicated to monitoring employee conduct and reviewing customer feedback with transparency and impartiality. Additionally, Pioneer Bank expanded its training programs to include regular workshops on unconscious bias, cultural competency, and ethical leadership. Imani personally vowed to hold quarterly open forums with staff and customers, ensuring that every voice was heard and that corrective measures could be swiftly implemented when necessary. As the courthouse doors closed on the final day of the trial, Imani stepped out into the bright Phoenix sunlight with a mixture of relief, determination, and hope. She knew that while legal vindication was a critical milestone, the real measure of success lay in the everyday interactions within Pioneer Bank, a place where every customer and every employee would be treated as a valued member of a community built on trust, respect, and the shared pursuit of a better future. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment when standing up for your principles led to real, transformative change? How did it reshape your view of fairness and justice?